Welcome to ILTV on the Hour. We're live here in Israel, bringing you the biggest headlines from the Middle East. It's currently 7 a.m. in New York and 2 p.m. here in Israel. I'm Ladarga Velazi, and here are the latest updates coming out of the region. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Hamas, warning return the hostage remains or expect action from the ceasefire agreement partners. Writing on his social media platform during a refueling stop in Doha, Qatar, Trump posted, quote, "We have a very strong peace in the Middle East, and I believe it has a good chance of being everlasting. Hamas is going to have to start returning the bodies of the deceased hostages, including 2 Americans, quickly, or the other countries involved in this great peace will take action. Some of the bodies are hard to reach, but others they can return now, and for some reason, they are not." According to Israeli intelligence, Hamas currently holds the remains of 8 hostages and does not know the location of the remaining 5. And for the first time since the ceasefire, Israel approved entry of a foreign team into Gaza to search for the remains. Aided by Egypt, a team with 2 engineering vehicles entered Gaza to help locate the 13 bodies. A senior Israeli official said that Israel is seeing signs of serious efforts from all sides, including Hamas, to locate and retrieve the bodies. And earlier, Trump met aboard Air Force One with Qatari Emir Al Thani and the Qatari Prime Minister and had this to say.
We've done this incredible peace to the Middle East, and they were a very big factor in it, so I just want to thank you. I was thinking, we're landing here, we're going to fuel up, and it's such an honor to have you on the plane. You don't do this often.
Never, first time.
I don't think he's ever done this, actually, but it's an honor. We have a great ally. He's a great ally. They are a great ally, and these are 2 great men. And as long as we're together and you have those cameras rolling, I want to just say we express our thanks, and you have a safe Middle East right now, and you're going to keep it that way for a long time.
And meanwhile, the United States has reportedly begun flying drones over Gaza to provide Washington an independent assessment of developments and to support the Civil Military Coordination Center, or CMCC, now operating under U.S. leadership from Kiryat Gat in Israel. According to the New York Times, the U.S. military is flying the spy drones over Gaza with Israel's consent. The CMCC is tasked with overseeing humanitarian, logistical, and security aid into Gaza as part of the post-war stabilization effort. About 200 American military personnel have been deployed to help run the facility, which also includes troops from Jordan, the UAE, the UK, Germany, France, Spain, Denmark, Canada, and Australia. U.S. Central Command stressed that American forces will not enter Gaza itself. And according to quoted officials, it's part of a broader effort to ensure that both Hamas and Israel are complying with the fragile ceasefire. Throughout the war, the IDF has relied heavily on drones for intelligence collection in its campaign against Hamas. However, the new U.S. flights suggest that Washington wants to know what's happening in the enclave independent of Israeli intelligence. Both the U.S. State Department and the IDF have declined to comment on the report. And U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio concluded his weekend visit to Israel with a meeting with released Israeli hostages before leaving. Rubio visited the U.S.-led Gaza Operations Center in Kiryat Gat, where he revealed some details of Washington's post-Gaza war vision moving forward. Rubio made clear that Hamas will be disarmed and Israel will have a say in choosing which nations will take part in the U.S.-led International Stabilization Plan, operating from southern Israel. And flanked by U.S. officers stationed at the Kiryat Gat Center, Secretary of State Rubio said the Trump peace plan, which includes a regional ceasefire and Gaza reconstruction framework, is the best and the only plan for stability in the region. He stressed that Hamas must be disarmed, but stopped short of saying Israel would need U.S. permission to resume fighting against Hamas if violence flares. Let's take a listen.
We fully expect that Hamas will fully demilitarize. That is the agreement they signed on to. That is the agreement that all of the nation states that joined this effort signed on to, and we expect it to be fulfilled. Suffice it to say that everyone that signed on to this plan, all of these other countries agreed, and everyone agreed that Hamas cannot govern and cannot be involved in governing the future of Gaza. Everyone's agreed to that.
And joining us now with more on these latest developments are Professor Kobi Michael, senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies, or INSS, and Misgav, and Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich, director of AJC Jerusalem. Thank you both for joining us today.
Hello.
Hello.
So, Professor Michael, let's start with you. U.S. President Donald Trump is once again issuing an ultimatum to Hamas. I've lost count, but he's issued many such ultimatums before, promising all hell will break loose. Is Hamas even taking him seriously at this point? Is there an intention on behalf of Hamas to actually return the hostages, to disarm?
I really doubt it, at least at this point. Maybe President Trump will surprise Hamas, and this is another misperception of Hamas. But I think that Hamas feels very, I would say, safe and secured and guaranteed because of Qatar and Turkey. And Hamas knows that both will do their utmost efforts in order to preserve their interests. I mean Hamas interests, because Hamas interests are the Turkish and the Qatarian interests in the very same time. And they want to waste time and to earn time. They use all the issue of the bodies, the dead hostages, as a sort of manipulation in order to reach to some achievements with regard to the redeployment of the IDF, with regard to the humanitarian aid supply, and mainly with regard to their disarmament. And at least as far as I understand Hamas now, I'm not sure that Hamas is very impressed from these ultimatums, but as I said before, they might be surprised.
So I do want to address all the issues with this peace agreement, but before that, I want to turn to you, Lieutenant Colonel Leibovich, and ask what's happening inside of Gaza now. I mean, how much of the Strip does Hamas control, or has Hamas regained control of since the IDF withdrawal?
You're actually catching me right now in the envelope of Gaza, hence I'm in my car, so apologies for that. Look, I think the biggest achievement of the current agreement is the fact that the IDF for Israel is still holding 53% of the territory of Gaza. But we know there are some areas which are Hamas free. Having said that, the reason the Hamas is stalling for so many days, and almost it's becoming weeks already, but not returning the bodies of the hostages, is exactly for that. So Hamas could rearm, could regroup, could reorganize, and therefore we are seeing different attempts of Hamas by recruiting people, for example, 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 17-year-olds. Of course, they're not in the level of professional fighters or terrorists, but this is why they need the time. So there are areas in Gaza which are Hamas free, but there are other areas which Hamas is still very much existent. We've saw the live executions on the streets, and this comes from the very extreme ideology of Hamas. And there are many questions that remain at this point of time. For instance, who will disarm Hamas? How will that happen? Will there be a situation in which one by one tunnel by one tunnel, there will be boots on the ground of some foreign military, foreign security source that will go and demilitarize that tunnel, that warehouse, the launchers? I mean, who would do all of that? This is a big question that is still yet to be answered. And until that is not taken care of, then Hamas can continue to strengthen its capabilities. Now, there's no doubt that Hamas did suffer a severe blow in the past 2 years, but we must not allow it to re-strengthen its capabilities. We cannot return to where we were on October 6th, of course.
Mm-hmm. And Kobi, back to you. I want to also address this report in the New York Times about the U.S. sending its own surveillance drones so as not to rely on Israeli intelligence. I mean, what do you make of this?
I think that President Trump and the American administration are making their utmost efforts in order to assure that nobody will destroy the party. and the party is the end of the war. And the end of the war is the ultimate condition that can open the path towards the realization of the grand vision of President Trump with regard to the broader Middle East. Now, we have to understand that there are no free meals, and all the plan of President Trump eventually was cooked or baked by Israel, by Prime Minister Netanyahu, Minister Ron Dermer, together with Witkoff and Kushner, and President Trump approved it. I think that the plan as a whole is a fantastic thing for Israel because by implementing all the plan in its entirely, Israel will be able to achieve all the 5 objectives of the war. And this will be the ultimate victory for Israel and the ultimate defeat of Hamas. Now, President Trump put all of his prestige on this plan, and in his eyes, this plan is a very crucial condition for his other plans. And when we are talking about these other plans, we are talking not about the Middle East. We are talking about Southeast Asia, where he is visiting just today. We are talking about Europe, Ukraine. We are talking about China. So I think that the Americans are trying to do their best efforts in order to assure that everything will go according to their plan.
Mm-hmm. And so this leads, to the next question, which is, has the United States essentially taken control over Gaza, the operations in Gaza? Prime Minister Netanyahu is insisting that this is a joint operation, but the U.S. seems to be the one calling all the shots. I mean, is that your assessment as well?
The question is addressed to me?
Yes, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yes, I think that Israel should be pleased from the idea that there is such a deep involvement of the Americans here, because this is something that signals, that indicates the depth of the American commitment. And the idea that the United States, as well as the Arab countries here in the region and some other countries beyond the region, are taking responsibility over the problem, which is the Gaza Strip and the Palestinians and Hamas, and all of this burden does not remain only on the shoulders of the State of Israel, is something that the State of Israel should be pleased. But on the other hand, Israel has to cooperate mainly with the American administration, and President Trump is the ultimate key for the success of this plan and for the realization of the Israeli objectives of the war. And therefore, I think that Israel has to do all the efforts in order to cooperate with the American administration, with President Trump, in order to give the best chances, first of all, to the realization of the plan, and secondly, to broaden and to deepen the legitimacy that Israel will need in the future in order to resume the military operations against Hamas, in order to dismantle Hamas in the case that Hamas will not comply. And if you are asking me, I think that the probability of this scenario is a bit higher than the probability that the plan of President Trump will be realized in its entirety.
And Avital, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. The U.S. seems to be the one calling all the shots. I mean, so I've asked Kobi, and I want to hear your thoughts. Is that your assessment as well? Because, the U.S. is sending a very strong message, sending Vice President J.D. Vance and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in 1 week. It reminds me of when the Biden administration sent then Secretary of State Antony Blinken to Israel multiple times to sort of micromanage the war. Is this the same message being relayed now by the Trump administration? We are micromanaging this. We are in charge?
Not at all. I want to take you back to 2015 and 2016, when Trump went to his political campaign in the US for his first term. And I read his speeches and I looked at some of the topics of the campaigns. And what I saw is that he spoke even 10 years ago about peace in the Middle East. So this was a vision that President Trump had already before he became president. It's not something new as a result of the last couple of years. So I think that this kind of connection that we were able to build, the Israeli government with the American administration, including the previous administration as well, I think it's priceless. And we see it all across the region. We see it in Lebanon, in the ceasefire coordination mechanism with the US and the Lebanese army and the IDF. And we see it now in Gaza. Now, I think it also proves another point. There were those critics who said, you know what? The American administration will lose interest soon and will move on to another topic. And you read a very long list of visitors that we had here, and this is just a clear indication that the interest has not lost. And on the contrary, the fact that there is a two-star general from CENTCOM, which took 200 soldiers with him and are locating here, they've relocated here to Israel to deal with this current agreement, I think it says a lot. Now, Israel as a country, the political leadership of Israel needs to utilize this kind of American interest and involvement in order to make sure the Israeli interests are taken care of. And of course, one of these interests, and this is something that we all want to see in the future, is the expansion of the Abraham Accords. And hence the great appetite to reach the second phase, which unfortunately, as we all know, and I agree with Kobi on this is not around the corner at this point of time.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to ask both of you, we'll start with Avital, what about Qatar? Kobi, you mentioned that, this peace plan was put together with Trump, Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and Ron Dermer. What about Qatar? Trump has also said that Qatar will send troops to Gaza, something Israel has opposed. So what is Qatar's role in all of this? Vital, let's start with you.
Frankly, I don't see any other country sending troops, boots on the ground to Gaza as long as there's armed Hamas. The Egyptians already vocally said that they will not do so, and I didn't see much enthusiasm from different countries, like from Saudi or Morocco, or the UAE maybe showed a little bit more interest, but I didn't see a huge motivation. So that's number one. Number two, look, Israel has certain interests which needs to keep, and at the end of the day, there are two countries in the world that are affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood that host Hamas leadership in their capitals. The first one is Qatar, the second one is Turkey. And we cannot help create an access of Muslim Brotherhood here just on our back doors, in our backyards here. And this is something, of course, that I assume Israel will resist. It will have to negotiate and create a dialogue with the Americans in order to find the best solution. I will not put my money on it. We will not see, but we will not see Qatari soldiers or Turkish soldiers on the ground in Gaza. I don't see that. They can, by the way, be a part of the renovation of Gaza. They can be a part of the humanitarian efforts, but boots on the ground, I don't see Israeli leadership agreeing to something like that.
Mm-hmm. And Kobi, do you agree with that? I mean, Secretary of State Rubio said during his visit that Israel will have the ultimate say in who gets to put boots on the ground. But J.D. Vance said, or hinted that Qatar, Turkey will still have a role. So what do you make of this?
First of all, I agree with Avital, but I would like to add something to the things that have been said by Avital. It's not only the idea of the military involvement. In this regard, I think that it will be pretty easy for Israel to reach to an understanding with the American administration. The problem, generally speaking, is the Turkish and the Qatarian influence. And they can get influence, and we see how Qatar get influence all over the globe, okay, without troops, by money. And therefore I think that Israel must be aware, and I'm sure that Israel is already aware to that. And here Israel will have some more difficulties to convince the American administration to minimize as much as possible the Turkish and the Qatarian roles and influence in the Gaza Strip, including in the reconstruction process. Because once they will be there, this will be boots on the ground, not military boots on the ground, but this will be, I would say, political boots on the ground. And it is something which is not less dangerous in my eyes, than military influence, because they will use their presence there in the Gaza Strip in order to support Hamas, in order to support the political entity of Hamas and its influence behind the scenes. Because the interests of Hamas, as I said before, are the interests of Turkey and Qatar as well. And now I think that this question is connected to your previous question about the depth of the American involvement. And if Israel wants to influence on the American administration and to reach to understanding with regard to Turkey and Qatar, if Israel wants that the American administration will be open to the Israeli demands or the Israeli interests, then Israel has to show good faith and goodwill with all the other parts of the plan and to enable the Americans to do what they have to do in order to realize the plan, because otherwise Israel will not be able to reach to such understanding, which are very crucial with President Trump and his staff.
And Avital, I do want to circle back to you and circle back to President Trump's warning, because the clock is ticking, the clock is counting down 48 hours ultimatum. So if Hamas fails to uphold its end of the agreement, which it seems right now that that's the case, what does that mean essentially? Who will go back in and fight Hamas? Clearly not Qatari and Egyptian troops, as we've discussed. Will it ultimately fall on Israel, or will the United States pressure Israel to sort of accept these setbacks by Hamas and sort of forge ahead with a peace deal regardless?
I think you're touching upon the complexity of the current situation. We are right now in a very sensitive situation, as there is no still international force controlling Gaza, actually no force at all. So some areas are controlled by local militias or groups or clans. There's still some Hamas, of course, presence in other areas. So we are quite in a very sensitive area where phase one has not completed and we're not yet ready to continue to phase two. I think the key here will be a direct dialogue and negotiations with the US, which I'm sure they understand the situation. By the way, this was quite a challenge because I don't think many countries in the world understood the meaning of returning bodies of hostages, how critical and crucial it was to us, to the Israeli people. But since we've crossed that line already, I think now it's understood, and Israel needs to move on to the second phase only when we have all the answers to the questions we have asked before. So we are not just there yet. We'll have to play it one day at a time. There's something that obviously we cannot look into the future. This is not a part of the world that we can really envision what will be the situation here on the ground in another week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a few months. It will have to be one day at a time. And by the way, we haven't discussed this in today, but there's this whole sector of psychological warfare that Hamas is using against Israel, against the Arab world. Also, the US, of course, is a part of the psychological efforts. We have seen that a few days in a row, Hamas is leaking information about releasing additional bodies of hostages, and a day pass, and 2 day pass, and 3 day passes, and nothing. So this is also another layer of the complexity and sensitivity of the situation. So I think we'll have to play it one day at a time, with a lot of ongoing dialogue with the representation here of the US CENTCOM.
Kobi, do you agree with that assessment, playing it one day at a time? That's what Israel can do at the moment?
I have 2 or 3 comments in this regard. The first comment is that even if the ISF, the International Stabilization Force, will be established and will begin operating in the Gaza Strip, if somebody believes that this force will be able to tackle Hamas and to dismantle Hamas, he lives or she lives under very heavy illusions. Okay, there is no entity in the entire globe, from edge to edge, that is willing and capable to tackle Hamas and to dismantle Hamas. And the only entity that exists that has the will and the capacity to do that is the IDF. And at the end of the day, it will be done by the IDF if Hamas will not comply voluntarily to do that, and I do not believe that Hamas will do it voluntarily. The second comment is that Hamas, and it goes back to your question about what is the essence of the ultimatum of 48 hours, okay? I can tell you, and I think that this is in a very high probability prediction, what Hamas will do. In the coming 48 hours, Hamas will release another 2-3 bodies, okay? And by releasing 2-3 bodies and saying that they have huge difficulties to reach to the other bodies and they need more time, they eventually will dismantle the ultimatum of President Trump. And Hamas will be happy with that because they will be able to continue wasting time and earning time. And President Trump will be happy because he will say, you see, 3 days they didn't release even a single body. Once I issue the ultimatum, they are releasing 2 bodies or 3 bodies, and they will continue to do that. And these are going to be the rules of the game, okay? Until President Trump will feel that enough is enough, and then he will declare or will say that Hamas does not comply, that Hamas actually opened by itself the gate of heaven, and Israel will resume the war against Hamas and will do what it has to do in order to dismantle Hamas. And this might be in parallel to the first implementation of the Trump in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, which there is in the places that there is no presence of Hamas. Okay, so the mechanism of the 3 components, the ISF, the technocrats government, and the peace board, can be established and begin operating in these areas, and this will be a living alternative to Hamas in the north, where Israel there in the north will fight Hamas in order to dismantle it until this mechanism will be able to expand itself and to get effective control over the entire Gaza Strip.
All right, we are almost out of time, but Avital, I do want to give you just a minute for your final thoughts.
Yeah, I want to share with you that I spent the last couple of hours here in Kibbutz Be'eri on the envelope of Gaza in a very unique ceremony commemorating the memory of more than 70 foreign workers from Asia and the Pacific who were murdered brutally on October 7th. From Thailand, 42 people. From the Philippines, 4. From Sri Lanka, from Nepal. Bipin Joshi from Nepal, his remains were returned last week. And so we need to reflect back for a minute and remember that at the end of the day, Hamas on October 7th never differentiated between Jews, Muslims, Buddhas, Christians, and others. And I think moving forward, and a lot of prayers were heard at the ceremony, and you know, prayers for a better future and hope for a better future, being there here at this point of time and not hearing the explosion sounds, and yet the roads here are swarming with cars as I've never seen in the last 2 years, actually gives me hope. But of course, we must make sure that the Israeli interests are well respected and taken care of, so that we would never, ever have another October 7th here.
Absolutely. Professor Kobi Michael and Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich, thank you so much for joining us today and for your insights.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And that is all the time we have at this hour, but you can join us every hour on the hour for ILTV's latest updates. We're coming to you live every hour with all the breaking news here from Israel and the region. I'm Lidar Gravelazi. Thank you so much for watching.